Life is hard, life is difficult. I'm a man and I can only speak for men because I've had that experience. Women have their fair share of challenges, but because I'm not a woman, it's hard for me to um, assume or imply that I can speak for women. So today in this episode, um, I want to share my experience on dealing with adversity. Basically handling adversity as a man, as a black man, as an African man living in the diaspora. So I don't know who you are. I don't know what challenges you're going through. I don't know what battles you're fighting at the moment. But I know that life is hard, and I'm hoping that with from me sharing my experiences of my own personal adversity and how I had to overcome the adversity. I'm hoping that it's going to be like a beacon of hope, to you to help you overcome whatever it is you're actually going through at the moment. I live in the diaspora. I've been living here in Portugal for like 6 years now. And sometime in 2017, I became a university, what do you call it, like a university professor here in Europe. Quite young at 26 years old. But guess what? At that time, I was quite comfortable. I was doing really well for myself, getting paid relatively good salary, especially as a young guy fresh out of the university, and I landed the job, all thanks to my professors who thought that, I was qualified enough to actually be given that job position. So, yeah, started teaching in the university 2017, was doing my thing. Frankly speaking, I didn't really have any reason to complain, or, I didn't really have any motive or motivation to actually say, hey, I wanted to like leave Nigeria and then come to Europe and start working, and stuff like that. But hey, 2018, I wanted to further my education. And of course, the implication for that is that I had to at least, pick a place, like a destination. I had some options: Brazil and Portugal, obviously. I don't like flying, so I focused more on Portugal. And the rest is history. I came to Portugal in 2018 to study linguistics at the prestigious University of Lisbon, Faculdade de Letras, which is the Faculty of Letters. Super excited for the new experience. But this is where, the problem began. So before I came, of course, I had to do like proof of funds and things like that. For any of you who was applied for study abroad, you need to do like proof of funds and things like this. Documentation to show that hey, you actually have the means to survive, and perhaps you're not going to take to crime and stuff like that. Remember, I was from the university, so documents everything legit, all verified, and of course, I had saved up a good chunk of money. This was 2018, and at that time, I think the dollar to naira rate was about, I don't know, maybe 300 thereabout, or 350. So I had to change some money from what we call the black market, which is like the parallel, as they call it, which is like you buying the money from the streets. This is common practice in Nigeria anyway. I don't know how it is in your countries. So yes, I bought about I changed about almost 3 million naira. Yes, to euros, and because it was from the black market, I didn't get a very good bargain. So I think I changed it for about 420 to one euro. Yes, so 1 euro. So yes, 420 naira gave me 1 euro. So I changed almost about 3 million. Well, long and short, I knew I had almost about 7,000 euros in cash after I did the change. So of course, 7,000 euros. My school fee was how much? Maybe 1,200 and something yearly, and I was going to study for 2 years. So I was like, hey, I'm sure this is more than enough for me to actually, at least get by, for the first 1 year that I'll be going for classes, and then of course the second year I was going to start my dissertation. So I felt like I had enough money for me to, at least start my life in Portugal. Super great, super excited. I left the shores of Nigeria, got into Portugal with 7,000 euros cash in my pocket. Cash in my pocket. And then, of course, some things happened. The person I was supposed to stay with, who was supposed to receive me, God bless his soul, he came to the airport to pick me. But while we were in the car, then, of course, he told me that, hey, my wife just put to bed and stuff like that. So this was unexpected. So you won't be able to stay with me. I won't be able to take you to my house, but I can take you somewhere that is quite close. You can stay there for like a week, and then, of course, from there, you can look for rooms or houses available, and then you can get something. It was good up until that time. And then, 3 days into my stay in Portugal, guess what? I was coming from a place that I was not used to walking around with large chunk of money. Remember, I was coming from Nigeria and I had changed about 3 million naira. That was a lot of money. So I came to Portugal with that mentality that, hey, this is a lot of money. I cannot walk around with 7,000 euros in my pocket. So guess what? I put the money in my bag, all locked. I'm telling you, very, 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 very sealed and secured. Apparently, it was like a shared. It was like a hostel for anybody who knows. Most of these European countries. It's like common practice. It was like a hostel. It was my first time in the country anyway. As I said, the guy came to keep me there. Because he's been here for, I don't know, more than 10, 15 years. So I was like, no, it's a good place. So I had like people also in that big room. And then I put my bag under my bed, pushed it under, and I think it was about, I had well over 6,000 euros in cash in that box, locked with the padlock and everything, all secured. And then I was hungry and I said, okay, I'm going to step out, and go eat. So I went somewhere, to eat like a buffet somewhere around Rocio for those who live in Portugal. And then got there, I think it was like 10 euros, I can't remember. This was on the third night in Portugal. Got back to my hostel and realized that my bag had been tampered with. I'm not talking about breaking the padlock. The padlock was intact. The zip, all intact. The person must have used a very, very sharp tool to basically slice through or slice around the bag, and they must have seen me keeping the money there. Guess what? The money was gone, long and short. And obviously, your initial reaction was like, nah, you must be kidding me. Are you kidding me, bro? Are you kidding me, bro? That was my first reaction, frankly speaking. Like everything was running through my head. My body became cold and then became warm. Became cold again. I was like, they don't run me street to. They don't run me street to. Oh, can you think I call my mother? I said, Engano, Engano. Oh. I mean, now it's easy to talk about it, but then, no jokes. I couldn't even find any smile. It was like I was shocked. I was perplexed. I was like, okay, I'm gonna close this bag and open it again and then see, perhaps maybe I didn't check properly. I checked, the money was gone, bro. The Yoruba people will say, "Oya sopoti lo." It means, "Oya, say don't go." Money was gone. The guy who was on the other bed, he was gone. So apparently he had paid for 5 nights based on my investigation. He had paid for 5 nights and only stayed 2 nights and then disappeared. So that was the prime suspect. Well, guess what? I went downstairs, rushed to the reception, told the guy, hey, that guy who left, I'm sure he took my money and stuff like that. Can I get like some information about him? And they said no, they wouldn't give any information. GDPR reasons, privacy reasons, confidentiality. I was mad as hell. Until today, my biggest regret was that I did not go to the police because I was too messed up in my head that at that point in time, I was not thinking straight. Frankly speaking, I think that's my biggest regret to date was that I didn't go to the police first. At that time, I was too worried about I had not paid my school fees. How was I going to survive? I had maybe about 500 euros that I had like cash with me. That was all I had left, 500 euros. Where was I going to start from? I didn't have a room to myself. I was still living in a hostel where I was paying like 15 to 20 euros per night. It was a whole mess going on. I had not even done my registration at the university. So I had not even started anything. Here was I had lost almost about, a little above 5,000 euros, going to 6,000 euros. 3 days into my arrival here in Portugal to study. So you can only imagine how it was for me from that day henceforth. So the point was, the first thing I realized was that I opened my passport and I saw that I had a 1 year visa. These were like, some reality check. I said, okay, I was given a 1 year visa to come to Portugal. I had used only 3 days from the 1 year visa. My first thoughts were, hey, I'm just gonna go online, get a ticket, and hey, I'm gonna bounce, I'm gonna head out back to Nigeria and say, hey, look, this was the situation. I'm not sure I can stay because I was not gonna be able to survive. And then guess what? While I was considering doing that, I was strongly considering doing that. I thought about it and I said, hey, wait a minute. I have people who I know, and of course, many other stories like that, who didn't even have a passport, one, who never applied for a visa, two. Some of these people actually crossed the Mediterranean. Of course, this is something that I totally discourage. But hey, a lot of these people crossed the Mediterranean, risked their lives through thick and thin, through the crazy weather, through the possibility of being killed in the Sahara Desert, and then of course many of these militias, in Libya and in Agadez and in Niger, and these people swam to get into Europe through Malta, through Italy, etc., etc. And these people were able to face all adversity and they were able to come out victorious. And I said, what excuse do I have? Like, what excuse do I actually have to say, I'm just going to give up, go back to Nigeria, and then sit down there and say, oh, well, I went there, I lost money, so I failed. And then that was when it dawned on me, and I said, well, this is my test. This is my test of, coming back from adversity. And then the first thing I did, I sat down and I began to strategize. So this is where it becomes interesting, and this is why I thought it important to share some of the things I did in this particular episode. So, in situations of adversity like that, I think one thing that helped me a lot was that I was able to adjust to my new reality. Remember, originally I wanted to get I was considering to get like a very comfortable apartment where, okay, maybe just like a 2 bedroom, me and one more person because I had the funds. I already knew automatically that I was not going to enjoy that luxury, so I cut it out. Of course, once in a while I'll go out, have fun, stuff like that. I cut that out. And hey, if I was thinking to, maybe, for example, eat out sometimes, the restaurant and stuff like that, I cut it out. So the point is, the first most important point was that you need to acknowledge your current reality and you need to adjust accordingly. What do I mean by that? You need to understand that, look, I am no longer able to afford those things that hitherto I would have been able to afford. So I think this is like the first reality check for handling adversity, because I think most times people like to live in denial. So imagine if, I was there and I was like, well, I don't care even if I've lost this money. I'm just gonna, those things that I wanted to do, I'm gonna try to do them. One, obviously, perhaps that would have pushed me to actually incur more debt. Maybe I would have gone to borrow, and of course, that would have led to a whole lot of mess. It means that I was going to have debt hanging around left and right. And I wanted to do everything possible to make sure that I was not owing any debt, basically. So, of course, I had some money in Nigeria, and then, of course, I got in touch back home, and I was getting some of those monies transferred to me via Western Union, I think, or MoneyGram, I can't recall. But of course, after a while, it was no longer practical, but I was able to survive all through that period. So, adjusting to the new reality, I think, is very, very important. And when I mean adjusting, I think largely financial, financial adjustments, which, of course, I can see that a lot of people would rather be in debt in order to, sustain that lifestyle as opposed to adjusting to that which they actually have at the moment, hoping that, hey, once I get through this particular moment, then of course, I can bounce back and gradually I can begin to increase my spending a little bit. And I think this is actually what puts a lot of people in mess, especially as men. Again, this is not to say that women do not have their own, share of adversity and difficulties. I'm just sharing my experience as an African man living in the diaspora, and I'm sure that there are many similar experiences like mine. Again, as I said at the beginning, I don't know what you are fighting with, I don't know what you're battling with, but I know that being a man is hard. The life of a man is hard, it's full of adversities. I totally understand that sometimes people might not understand what I'm saying, and that is actually because they do not, how do I put this? Like, men are not very, very expressive, when they're actually going through hard times. They're not very, very expressive when they're going through hard times. But of course, we know as men, the burden that we actually have to carry, the responsibility, the weight. Because for me, it was harder because at that time, I couldn't even share the information with my family. Why? I didn't want to put them in panic. Because the whole thing about, oh, in that case, just come back home and this and this. Because sometimes you tell somebody something in your family and then they basically blow it out of proportion. It was a hard time. You have no idea. There were days that I couldn't sleep well. There were days, of course, many times I was not eating well. I was not eating properly. Basically, at that time, my best friend was pasta. My best friend was pasta and tomato sauce and all that. It was a very, 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 very difficult time. So another thing I'm going to say that helped me was that, of course, I had people that I could share, these problems with. What I mean by that is like people who were actually here. So I had one or two people that I could talk to, you know, that basically I could transfer that burden to. Even if yes, they were not going to help me financially anyway, but it feels good that you have people that you can confide in. And I think this is another thing that helps during your difficult times of adversity. It's nice to always find that person that you can talk to. And when I mean that person you can talk, I'm not talking about somebody who is flippant, who already is going to go off and start telling you that, oh man, this is a hopeless situation and all that. I'm talking about another man, especially if you're a single guy, another man that you can speak to man to say, bro, man, I'm in a very, very big mess. And you guys can just talk it out and you leave there feeling like, okay, I've shared it out. And then, of course, I feel somewhat light so that you don't do anything crazy. When I mean anything crazy, I mean, man, you have no idea. I had too many thoughts going through my head. I was just lucky with the kind of background I had growing up in the hood. I had seen too much, perhaps, to prepare me to, actually absorb that shock, of that very, very negative experience. So first thing you need to be willing to adjust to your new reality, cut down spending. Of course, you need to slow down so that you don't become financially reckless. Avoid debt as much as possible. And secondly, you need to find that one person that you can confide in, because again, you don't want to go around trying to solicit or elicit pity from people. No, that's not the goal, because the situation is bad already. You just want to speak to that person. Basically, you want to vent. It's always good to look for somebody to vent. Maybe not so many people, but look for that one person that you know that, hey, this person has got my back. He might not have the money. And most times you are not necessarily asking for the money, but you just need to vent at that time. Say, hey, man, this is actually eating deep into me and I just want to vent. So I think this is actually very, 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 very important you know and of course, I think most another very, very important thing was that at that time I was laser focused, and of course I was occupying myself with the things that actually mattered. What I mean was, I was every day trying to make practical steps or take practical steps to actually take me out of that mess. What I mean by that is, one, I was going for classes, doing my assignments, making sure that I was following all the necessary schedules. And then, of course, I was already projecting to say, okay, once I'm done with my coursework, I'm going to try to walk, and things like that. So basically, I made sure that I did not have a lot of loose time, because I think during those loose times, that is when your mind begins to wander around, and then you're thinking of the very, very extreme or ridiculous things that you could actually do. So these things for me, I think, helped me. Of course, if I wanted to go into every little detail, I think this video is going to be maybe almost 2 hours or 3 hours. But I think the most important thing, the most important absolute thing, was that you need to know when to adjust. Because when the new reality hits you, you already know that, hey, I cannot do this, I cannot do this because I am financially constrained. Again, for many other people, it could be that you are trying to, maybe, let's say, do like a career shift. You're trying to like transition into a different career, and you're having a very, very hard time. For some other people, it could be that you went through a very, very terrible heartbreak. Especially as a man, it's more difficult. But this is a conversation for another day. People believe that oh, it's more difficult for women and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but as men, maybe African men particularly, it's way, 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 way more devastating. And maybe you're that guy, you are that phase. You feel like, hey, you're going into a dark place. I just want to tell you that, hey, bro, we've been there as well. We all have our battles that we're fighting. And, again, I think it's important for me to mention this particular point. I come from a place where I already knew that as a man, I must be willing to do those things that are hard. So I had those kind of models around me, those kind of role models around me, who already instilled that thought in me that, hey, you have to suffer in order for you to prove yourself worthy of being called a man. I guess you might have a different perspective, and I totally respect your perspective. But for me, personally, you cannot go through life doing the easy things and then you want to call yourself a man. Because it is not in the easy things that you actually, discover the extent, of how much you can endure. It's in doing the hard things. And this is the reason why somebody like Albert Einstein said, adversity introduces a man to himself. Albert Einstein says, he actually said that. Adversity introduces a man to himself. When you dissect that, you see how deep it is. Because imagine you go through life doing the easy things. It just simply means that, hey, you do not necessarily have the endowment of what it takes, just in case adversity hits you, difficulty hits you. So imagine if you're trying to transition into like a new field. It's really hard. You've been doing like a very, very low paying job, and there you are trying to take that bold step. It's hard. I know it's hard, but again, remember, for you to be a man, you have to do the hard things. You have to do the hard things. So again, it's important for us as men to see suffering as a prerequisite for success. It's always very, very important, because hey, what is the fun of a success? I mean, what is the fun of having success without a success story? You have so many of these examples. So many of these examples. So I always see suffering as part of as part of the price to pay, as part of the sacrifice, to make in order for me to actually come out and say, hey, now I have this in my CV to say, hey, I've been through this, and this was the way that I was able to navigate it. So suffering, adversity, and difficulties should not be seen so much in the negative, because hey, it only means that, hey, there is something I'm doing, I'm working towards something, and that is why there is a force that is pushing back. So I have to push against this force, and when I come out on the other side, I can say, hey, I actually went through this, I survived it, and this has made me a stronger person. And of course, there is another popular quote that says, if you're going through hell, keep going. I remember as a university undergraduate, I had a whole lot of motivational quotes. I could give you 100 from the top of my head. Back then, of course, not now anymore. But back then, because I was feeding myself with this kind of positive quotes, that when it became tough, when it became hard, I had a quote for every situation. So it says, when you're going through hell, keep going. I mean, you're in hell already. So, I mean, you're in hell anyway. So it doesn't make any sense to stop and then, get burnt in hell. So you have to keep going. And then there is a popular Yoruba motivational quote that says, Ilé ọba tó jó, ẹ̀wù ló bù sí. I'll repeat it. Ilé ọba tó jó, ẹ̀wù ló bù sí. It simply means that the burning of the king's palace only added beauty to it. For those who don't understand Yoruba, it means that the fact that the king's palace was burnt, it only gave extra beauty to it. So What this simply means is that you have to see the good in every bad situation. That at the end of the tunnel there is always a light. So treat adversity as these motivational quotes. Do not see adversity as, oh, look, this is the end of me. See adversity as a necessary step that you need to climb in order for you to get to that next level. Because it's always like that. Stage one is always easier than stage two. Stage two is always easier than stage three. Stage four is more difficult than stage three. So these were the things that I had to feed myself that eventually helped me come out of that whole situation. Of course, it's, it was difficult, it was tough, because sometimes you felt like you were lost. You felt like, oh, is all this worth it? I can just give up, go back to my comfortable life in Nigeria and stuff like that. But I knew the reason why I came here. I came for I actually came because I needed to get an education and things like that. And of course, I was working as a translator and interpreter. So being in Portugal was very important for me because my first degree was Portuguese and English. But I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side. But I was able to pull through. I was able to pull through. I saw adversity as a necessity. I took it, I accepted it, and then I began to adjust to my new realities, and that helped me a lot. And of course, as I said, secondly, it's always important. I think perhaps I should have opened up more to more people because my family didn't know for so many years. I only told them recently. So, of course, it's always nice if you have loved ones that you can actually share with. I highly encourage that. It wasn't the case for me, but I had one or two people that I could actually speak to, you know. And of course, as I told you, it's also very, very important, to see adversity more like a positive and not the negative. Because only by so doing can you begin to somehow feed your mind to be more resilient. And then that way, in the long run, you're going to see that, hey, it was just a temporary phase in your life. So, guys, I'm not going to keep this very, very long. This was my personal experience. I don't know what you're going through at the moment. I don't know what dark place you are. I just want you to understand that, hey, remember the quotes of the Yoruba says, Ile Obatojo Ewulobusi, that the burning of the king's palace has added beauty to it. So take the positives, hang in there, focus on the goal, keep your eyes on the mark, and I'm very, very sure that you're going to come through. And I'm hoping that, hey, I'm sending you love and light. And of course, let me know if you've had a similar experience. What was your adversity story? How did you handle it? And put it in the comments. And don't forget, guys, like and subscribe because this actually helps grow the channel. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the very next one. Peace.